Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Marshall Benjamin had always been good at reading people. 20 years in competitive litigation had taught him to spot tells. The subtle shifts in body language, the rehearsed responses, the too careful word choices. But he'd missed the signs at home, or maybe he'd simply chosen not to see them. Friday evening, his daughter Emma bounded down the stairs with her overnight bag. 9 years old and still young enough to be excited about a weekend at Grandma Sophia's. Brooke had suggested it over breakfast, casual as discussing the weather. My mom hasn't seen Emma in a while. Thought it might be nice for them to have some quality time. Marshall had nodded, already mentally sorting through the depositions, waiting in his study. He'd built his reputation dismantling corporate fraud cases, finding the threads others missed, pulling until entire facades unraveled. The work consumed him, he knew that. Brooke had mentioned it enough times, though lately those complaints had stopped. He'd taken the silence as acceptance. He should have known better. Emma hugged him tight at the door. "Love you, Dad. See you Monday." "Love you too, sweetheart." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Have fun with Grandma." He watched Brooke's car disappear down their tree-lined street in suburban Connecticut, then returned to his study. The weekend passed in a blur of case files and legal briefs. Brooke had driven back Sunday evening alone, saying Emma wanted to stay one more night. Marshall had barely looked up from his laptop. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable cold for September. Marshall was reviewing a witness statement when the doorbell rang at 9:15. He found a process server on his doorstep, professional smile already in place. "Marshall Benjamin?" "Yes. You've been served." The manila envelope hit his hands with surprising weight. Marshall waited until the man left before opening it. "Divorce papers. Petition for full custody. Emergency restraining order pending." The words blurred together as his legal mind automatically cataloged the filing. Rushed, aggressive, designed for maximum damage. Filed Friday afternoon. Sealed hearing scheduled for Wednesday. His phone buzzed. Brooke's name lit up the screen. "Emma's staying with my mother permanently," she said without preamble. "My lawyer will be in touch about visitation." "Maybe. What the hell are you talking about?" "I'm done, Marshall. Done being married to a ghost. Done watching Emma grow up with a father who's never actually present. You chose your career over us every single day. Now I'm choosing us. You can't just take my daughter. Already did. Don't come to my mother's house. Don't try to contact Emma. The restraining order will be processed by end of day." The line went dead. Marshall stood in his hallway, papers still in hand, mind racing. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. The timing was too precise, too calculated. Brooke had been planning this, using his own workload as cover. The weekend visit was never about quality time with Grandma. He pulled on his coat and was in his car 10 minutes later. Sophia Dodson lived 40 minutes away in a wealthy enclave near the coast, one of those communities where old money whispered rather than shouted. Marshall had always found the place suffocating. The manicured lawns, the judgment behind polite smiles, the subtle condescension toward anyone who'd actually worked for their success. The Dodson family had built their fortune 3 generations back in textiles, then diversified into real estate. Sophia lorded over the remaining empire like a queen, viewing Marshall as an acceptable but ultimately disappointing choice for her daughter. Lawyers were professionals, certainly, but they served at the pleasure of their betters. He tolerated it for Emma's sake. For Brooke's sake. Clearly, that tolerance hadn't been reciprocated. Marshall turned on Elm Ridge Drive, his Mercedes navigating the familiar curves. Sophia's house came into view, a sprawling colonial that managed to be both elegant and imposing. 2 cars he didn't recognize blocked the circular driveway, parked at angles that screamed territorial. He pulled up to the curb and approached on foot. The lockbox was gone from the front gate. He tested it anyway. Locked. New deadbolt by the looks of it. Movement in the upstairs window caught his eye. Emma's face appeared briefly, tear-streaked and pale, before someone pulled her back. The curtain fell closed. Marshall's hands curled into fists. Whatever game Brooke and her mother were playing, Emma was terrified. That crystal-clear fact cut through his confusion and ignited something cold and precise in his chest. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 6 years. "Benjamin," came the gravelly voice after 2 rings. "Been a while. Vernon, I need you." Vernon Barker had been Marshall's first real client, back when Marshall was a junior associate willing to take anything that walked through the door. Vernon had walked in looking like a stereotype. Prison tattoos, scarred knuckles, dead eyes. He'd been charged with assault, facing 10 years. Marshall had won the case in 4 hours. Not because Vernon was innocent. The man had absolutely hospitalized someone, but because the someone in question had been caught on surveillance footage threatening Vernon's teenage daughter with a knife. Self-defense of another. The prosecutor had overreached. Marshall had buried them. Vernon never forgot. More importantly, Marshall learned that Vernon's rough exterior concealed a sharp mind and unexpected resources. After his acquittal, Vernon had rebuilt himself, going legitimate in private security and investigation. But he maintained contacts with people who lived in the shadows, people who could do things lawyers couldn't. "What's the situation?" Vernon asked. Marshall explained in clipped sentences. The divorce. Emma's capture, because that's what it was, he realized. His daughter had been taken. Address? Marshall provided it. "Give me 15 minutes. The line went dead. Marshall waited, leaning against his car, watching the house. 12 minutes later, a black panel van turned onto the street, followed by 2 SUVs. They moved with military precision, parking to box in the vehicles blocking the driveway. Vernon climbed out of the first SUV, 6'4", and built like a linebacker, his gray hair cut military short. 5 men emerged from the other vehicles, all carrying themselves with the same predatory awareness. "Marshall." Vernon's handshake could crush stone. "Talk to me. My daughter's inside. They've locked her in, changed all the locks. I saw her in the upstairs window. She was crying." Vernon's jaw tightened. He had 3 daughters of his own. "What do you want?" "I want my daughter, and I want to know why they think they can do this." Vernon nodded to his men. 2 approached the front door while the others fanned out around the property. One pulled out a lockpick set. The front door opened before they could use it. Sophia Dodson stood in the entrance, imperious in a cream cashmere sweater, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. Behind her, Marshall caught a glimpse of Brooke, and his blood went cold. Preston Holmes. Preston fucking Holmes. Senior partner at a rival firm, old money Connecticut through and through, and someone Marshall had humiliated in court 8 months ago. Marshall had represented a startup against Preston's Fortune 500 client, David versus Goliath, and made Preston look like he'd gotten his law degree from a cereal box. Suddenly, pieces clicked into place. "This is private property," Sophia announced. "You're trespassing." Vernon smiled. All teeth, no warmth. "Ma'am, I'm here to collect a minor child on behalf of her legal guardian. You want to discuss trespassing? We can involve the police. I'm sure they'd be interested in why you're holding a 9-year-old against her will." "Against her will? She's with her grandmother and mother. Perfectly legal. Then you won't mind her confirming that." Sophia's composure cracked slightly. She's upset. Seeing her father would only make things worse. "Funny," Vernon said, moving forward. His men moved with him, a coordinated advance. "Because from where I'm standing, seems like she got upset when you locked her in. Now you can produce the child, or we can go inside and get her. Your choice, but you're making it in the next 10 seconds. Preston appeared beside Sophia, phone in hand. "I'm calling the police." "Do it," Marshall said, finding his voice. "Call them. Explain why you changed the locks on a house to prevent a father from seeing his daughter. Explain why you filed for an emergency restraining order based on what I'm guessing are fabricated allegations. Go ahead, Preston. I'd love to watch you explain this to a judge." Preston's finger hovered over the screen, but he didn't dial. "That's what I thought." Marshall continued, stepping closer. "You overplayed your hand. Whatever you're planning with my wife, you jumped too fast." "Marshall, don't make this harder than it needs to be," Brooke said, emerging fully into view. She looked polished, prepared. This was a performance she'd rehearsed. "We both know this marriage has been over for months. I'm simply doing what's best for Emma. By traumatizing her, I saw her face, Brooke. She's terrified. She's adjusting. Children are resilient. You don't believe that any more than I do. Marshall studied his wife's face, searching for the woman he'd married. He found only carefully maintained distance. How long have you and Preston been planning this? Brooke's eyes flickered to Preston. Just a momentary glance, but Marshall caught it. Ah, he said softly. That long. What's he promised you, Brooke? A partnership at his firm? Access to his family money? Or is it just revenge by proxy? He gets back at me. You get a meal ticket? You arrogant bastard, Preston snapped. Not everything is about you. No. Then what's this about? Because kidnapping my daughter seems excessive for a simple divorce. Vernon cleared his throat. Touching as this is, I'm going inside to get Emma. Anyone tries to stop me will have problems. He moved toward the door. Sophia started to close it, but Vernon's palm caught it effortlessly, muscles barely flexing as he pushed it wide. His men followed him in. Brooke looked panicked now. You can't just. Watch me, Vernon called back. Marshall heard footsteps thundering up the stairs, then Emma's voice, small and scared. Uncle Vernon? Vernon had met Emma twice, both times at Marshall's office when Marshall couldn't find childcare. The little girl had been fascinated by the big man with the gentle voice, sitting in his lap while he told her sanitized stories from his security work. Hey there, princess. Vernon's voice drifted down, warm and reassuring. Your dad's outside. Want to see him? Yes. They wouldn't let me call him, and Mom said, It's okay now. Come on. Vernon descended the stairs with Emma in his arms. She was still in her pajamas from the night before, eyes red from crying, clutching her stuffed rabbit like a lifeline. The moment she saw Marshall, she reached for him. Daddy! Marshall caught her as Vernon transferred her over, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, so tight it hurt. She was shaking. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you, sweetheart. They said I couldn't see you anymore, Emma sobbed. Grandma said you didn't want me, but I knew that wasn't true. I knew it. Never, Marshall said fiercely. That's never true. I will always want you. Over Emma's head, he locked eyes with Brooke. She had the grace to look away. This isn't over, Preston said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're right, Marshall agreed. It's not. But the next move is mine. He carried Emma to his car, Vernon and his team creating a protective corridor. As he buckled her into the back seat, she grabbed his hand. Are you going to make them pay, Daddy? Like you do with bad people in court? Marshall looked at his daughter, 9 years old, and already understanding that justice sometimes needed help arriving. He thought about Preston's smug face, Brooke's calculated betrayal, Sophia's casual cruelty. Yes, he said quietly, I'm going to make them pay. Because Marshall Benjamin had spent 20 years learning how to destroy people in a courtroom, and some lessons transferred beautifully outside one. That evening, Marshall sat in his study with Emma asleep upstairs, Vernon across the desk from him. Tell me everything, Vernon said. Marshall opened his laptop, pulling up files he'd started compiling the moment he'd gotten home. Preston Holmes, 42, senior partner at Holmes and Pritchard, old Connecticut family, trust fund baby who thinks he earned his position. I destroyed him in the Vanguard Tech case 8 months ago. His clients settled for pennies on the dollar, and the case was high profile enough that it hurt his reputation. Revenge, then? Partially. But there's more. Marshall clicked to another file. Brooke's maiden name is Dodson. Her mother, Sophia, controls the family real estate portfolio, worth approximately $40 million. Brooke stands to inherit, but Sophia has been threatening to write her out for years. Why? Because I'm not good enough, apparently. Sophia wanted Brooke to marry someone from their social circle, someone with a pedigree. When Brooke married me instead, the son of a postal worker who put himself through law school, Sophia made it clear she'd rather leave her money to charity than see it go to my children. Vernon's expression darkened. So Brooke gets rid of you, takes up with Preston Holmes, old money, right family, and suddenly she's back in mommy's good graces. That's my theory. And if she can paint me as an absent, negligent father in the custody hearing, she gets Emma and I get supervised visitation at best. Preston probably helped craft the legal strategy. It's actually elegant in a sociopathic way. Except they show their hand too early, Vernon observed. Grabbing Emma like that, the fake restraining order, That's desperation, not strategy. Marshall nodded slowly, which means there's something else. Some timeline they're working against. He pulled up another file. I made some calls this afternoon. Sophia's been trying to sell a commercial property portfolio for 6 months. Prime real estate, but the market's been soft. She finally got an interested buyer last week. Let me guess. Sale requires family approval. The trust is structured so that Sophia's children, Brooke and her brother, have to sign off on major transactions. If Brooke's married to me, I have legal standing to review the sale. If we're divorced and she's with Preston, he can advise her and he'll rubber stamp whatever Sophia wants. Vernon leaned back. What's the property worth? $18 million. But I bet my career the buyer is paying under market value. Probably someone Sophia owes favors to, or someone who has leverage. So we're looking at fraud. We're looking at several things. Marshall's smile was cold. Preston's involvement adds another layer. He's not just dating Brooke for love or revenge. He's got skin in this game. His firm handles the sale. No, too obvious. But I bet he's connected to the buyer somehow. Maybe he represents them in other matters. Maybe there's a finder's fee. I need to dig deeper. Vernon stood, pacing to the window. What's your play? I'm going to do what I do best, Marshall said. I'm going to investigate until I find every piece of dirt, every shady connection, every illegal shortcut. Then I'm going to bury them with it. In court, that's one option. But court is slow, and they might hurt Emma in the meantime. No, I need something faster. Something that makes them understand they made a mistake. Vernon turned, a predatory gleam in his eye. I'm listening. Marshall pulled out a leather-bound folder, the kind he used for his most sensitive cases. Preston has a weakness. He gambles. Poker, sports betting, anything with odds. Usually he wins, because he's smart enough to know when to fold. But 6 years ago, he had a bad run. Lost heavily to some people who don't accept IOUs. How heavily? $300,000. He paid it off by giving them insider information on real estate deals his firm was handling. Information that led to some very profitable acquisitions. Vernon whistled. That's disbarment territory. How'd you get this? I didn't, not officially, but one of my investigators heard rumors during the Vanguard case. I couldn't use it then. No proof, just whispers. But whispers can become evidence with the right pressure. You want me to find the proof. I want you to find the people he owes. Because I guarantee Preston's gambling again. Men like him always do. And I want to know who he's in bed with besides my wife. Vernon pulled out his phone, already scrolling through contacts. Give me 48 hours. Make it 24. Brooke's going to push for that emergency hearing. I need leverage before then. Done. Vernon headed for the door, then paused. Marshall, what you said to Emma about making them pay. You meant it. It wasn't a question. Every word. Good. Some people need to learn that actions have consequences, especially when they hurt kids. After Vernon left, Marshall climbed the stairs to check on Emma. She was curled around her stuffed rabbit, face peaceful in sleep despite the trauma of the day. He sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to wake her. He'd built his career on the principle that truth, properly presented, always won. That justice, while sometimes slow, was inevitable. But looking at his daughter's tear-stained face, Marshall acknowledged what he'd always known but never admitted. Justice was a luxury, and sometimes you had to make your own. Preston Holmes wanted revenge. He was going to learn the difference between embarrassment in a courtroom and complete annihilation. Brooke wanted freedom and money. She was going to discover that betrayal came with a price. And Sophia? She was going to realize that dismissing someone as beneath her was a fatal miscalculation. Marshall Benjamin had spent 20 years fighting clean. But every lawyer knew the dirty tricks, too. They just chose not to use them. That choice, he decided, was no longer operative. Tuesday morning broke gray and cold. Marshall had Emma enrolled in her regular school by 8, with Vernon's team providing discreet security outside. Brooke's lawyer had already called twice, demanding Emma's return. Marshall let it go to voicemail. He was in his office by 9, door closed, working 3 cases simultaneously. His official caseload, his divorce defense, and what he was starting to think of as project demolition. His phone buzzed. Vernon, calling from an unlisted number. Got something. Vernon said without preamble. Preston's current gambling debt is $250,000. He owes it to a group running a high-stakes poker game out of a club in Manhattan. They're not mob, exactly, but they're not choir boys either. Names? The club's called the Ivory Room. Legitimate front, illegal back room. Owner is a guy named Edmund Madden. Former Wall Street trader, caught insider trading, but skated on a technicality. Now he runs games for people who can't lose face in Vegas. Marshall typed the name into his database. Edmund Madden appeared in several lawsuits, all settled quietly, all involving gambling debts. Madden know about Preston's past? Not yet, but here's the interesting part. Preston's been betting on a sure thing, the Dotson property sale. He's told Madden the sale is guaranteed to close at $18 million, and he's using that as collateral for his debt. Except if the sale doesn't happen. Madden gets very unhappy, and Preston becomes very exposed. Marshall felt the first stirrings of a plan. Can you give me a meeting with Madden? Already set up. Tonight, 8 p.m. He's curious about the lawyer who broke Preston in court. Perfect. What else? Sophia Dotson's buyer for the property? It's a shell company called Meridian Holdings. Took some digging, but the principal owner is Roland Barrera. Marshall froze. Roland Barrera was a real estate developer with a reputation for skirting building codes and safety regulations. 2 of his properties had collapsed in the past decade, killing 4 people. Lawsuits had been settled, records sealed, but Marshall had consulted on one of the cases. He knew exactly how dirty Barrera was. Barrera's paying $18 million for property worth at least $25, Marshall said slowly. Why would Sophia sell low? Because Barrera's blackmailing her, Vernon said. How about a source at City Hall? Barrera has documentation that Sophia has been running a tax avoidance scheme through her properties for 15 years. We're talking millions in unpaid taxes, maybe federal charges if it comes out. So Barrera gets a sweetheart deal. Sophia avoids prison, and everyone's happy. Except Preston needs the sale to go through at that price to cover his gambling debt. And Brooke needs the sale to happen, so Sophia stays grateful and keeps her in the will. Marshall smiled. They're all locked together. One domino falls, they all do. What's the play? I'm going to give them a choice. They can destroy themselves trying to save themselves, or they can give me what I want and walk away damaged but alive. They won't take the deal. I know, but watching them refuse will be enjoyable. And when they make the wrong choice, I'll have the moral high ground. Vernon chuckled darkly. You're a cold bastard, Marshall. I learned from the best opponents. That afternoon, Marshall met with his own lawyer, Aaron Stevenson, a shark who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Aaron reviewed the emergency restraining order petition and laughed. This is garbage, Aaron said, tossing the papers aside. Brooke's alleging emotional neglect and claiming you're a danger to Emma? The same Emma who ran to you yesterday? Judge Chun will tear this apart. I need more than that, Marshall said. I need full custody. No visitation for Brooke until she demonstrates she's stable. Aaron's eyebrows rose. That's aggressive. You need to prove she's genuinely unfit. She kidnapped our daughter and held her against her will while filing false allegations. How much more unfit do you need? In the eyes of the law, quite a bit more. Judges favor mothers, especially with young children. Marshall leaned forward. What if I could prove Brooke's planning to move out of state with Emma? Cut off all my parental rights. Can you prove that? Not yet. But if she's planning to marry Preston Holmes, and his family has properties in the Caymans where they spend 6 months a year. Aaron's eyes gleamed. That changes things. File a motion to prevent her from moving Emma out of Connecticut. Claim flight risk. But you need evidence of intent. I'll get it. After Aaron left, Marshall turned to his computer. He'd built his reputation on thorough investigation, on finding the details others missed. Time to apply those skills to his personal life. He started with social media. Brooke had been careful, no public posts about Preston. But her friend, Kelly Graves, one of those performatively loyal friends who broadcast everything, had posted photos from a dinner party 2 weeks ago. Marshall zoomed in on the background. Preston's arm around Brooke's waist, her hand on his chest, body language that screamed intimacy. The photo was time-stamped 3 weeks before Brooke asked for divorce. Marshall downloaded the image, added it to his evidence file. Adultery wasn't grounds for custody in Connecticut, but it established character. More importantly, it established timeline. He dug deeper. Brooks' credit card statements, which he still had access to as joint account holder, showed charges at restaurants where Preston was known to dine. Hotel stays in Manhattan when she claimed to be at spa weekends with friends. Receipts from jewelry stores. Expensive pieces he'd never seen her wear. The pattern was clear. Brooke and Preston had been together for at least 3 months, possibly longer. The divorce wasn't about Marshall's neglect. It was about replacing him with an upgrade. His phone rang. Vernon again. Got something else, Vernon said. Brooke's brother just flew in from Seattle. Marshall sat up. Guy Dotson? What's he doing here? Don't know yet, but he went straight to Sophia's house. My guy followed him from the airport. Guy Dotson was Brooke's older brother, a tech entrepreneur who'd made and lost 2 fortunes in Silicon Valley. Last Marshall heard, Guy was on his 3rd startup, perpetually 1 round of funding away from success or bankruptcy. Guy needs money. Marshall said, pieces clicking. He always needs money. If Sophia is selling property, Guy's probably expecting his cut. So we got Sophia trying to avoid prison, Preston covering gambling debts, Brooke angling for inheritance, and Guy looking for a payday. That's a lot of people with their hands in one cookie jar. And they all need me out of the picture to get it, Marshall said. Which means they're going to fight dirty. Speaking of which, heads up, I just got word that Preston's hired a private investigator. Guy named Steve Phillips, real bottom feeder. He specializes in manufacturing evidence for custody cases. Marshall's jaw tightened. What kind of evidence? Photos with escorts, fake drug tests, anything that makes you look unstable. Phillips has connections with people who'll swear to anything for the right price. When does he start? Probably already has. I'd watch your back, Marshall. These people are playing for keeps. Marshall ended the call and sat in his office, the city sprawling below his windows. 20 floors up, he could see the courthouse where he'd won hundreds of cases. Justice was supposed to happen there, clean and clear. But justice was for people who play by rules. And Brooke had just proved she wasn't one of them. Fine. If they wanted to manufacture evidence, he'd give them a target. But the evidence they found would be the evidence he wanted them to find. He pulled up a contact he hadn't used in years. Sherry Bright, a publicity consultant who specialized in image rehabilitation. Her client list included celebrities, politicians, and white-collar criminals. She was expensive, ruthless, and very good at her job. Marshall Benjamin, she purred when she answered. I heard you were having domestic troubles. How delightful. I need a campaign, he said. Full media blitz. Devoted father, wronged husband, fighting for his daughter against a vindictive ex and her corrupt family. Can you prove corrupt? Give me a week. I can work with that. But Marshall, sweetie, media campaigns are expensive. And they're permanent. Once you paint your ex-wife as the villain, there's no going back. Are you sure? Marshall thought about Emma crying in that upstairs window. I'm sure. Then let's destroy her. Tuesday night at 8, Marshall walked into the Ivory Room. The club occupied a historic building in Lower Manhattan, all brass fixtures and leather booths. The legitimate front served craft cocktails to finance types. The back room, accessible through an unmarked door, was where real business happened. Edmund Madden waited in a private booth, bourbon in hand. He was 50-something, silver-haired, with a kind of weathered face that came from decades of high-stakes decisions. 2 men flanked him, clearly security. Mr. Benjamin, Madden said, gesturing to the opposite seat. Vernon speaks highly of you. Vernon's a good man. Rare quality these days. Madden studied Marshall with shrewd eyes. You're here about Preston Holmes. I am. He owes me $250,000. Says he's good for it based on a property sale. You're going to tell me why that's a problem. Marshall laid it out cleanly. The divorce, the custody battle, the property sale that required Marshall's cooperation, or at least his absence. Preston's using your money as leverage in a domestic dispute. If the sale doesn't go through, you're out $250,000. Madden's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened on his glass. And you're telling me this out of the goodness of your heart. I'm telling you because I want Preston exposed. He's betting your money on a rigged game, and the rig depends on ruining my reputation and taking my daughter. I take issue with that. What do you want from me? Apply pressure. Call in the debt. Force Preston to scramble. When people scramble, they make mistakes. I want him making mistakes. Madden considered this. What's in it for me? Marshall pulled out a folder. Complete documentation of the property sale, including the fact that the buyer, Roland Barrera, is paying $7 million under market value. If that sale falls through and the property goes to auction, it'll fetch $25 million minimum. I can ensure you're first in line as a potential buyer with proper financing. You'd tank the sale that Preston's using as collateral. I'm going to tank the sale regardless. Question is whether you want to be positioned to profit from it. Madden smiled slowly. Vernon said you were smart. He undersold you. So we have a deal? We have the beginning of one. I'll call Preston's debt due tomorrow. 72 hours to pay, or I start taking assets. That work for you? Perfectly. They shook hands. As Marshall left the ivory room, he felt the familiar rush of a plan coming together. Preston thought he was playing chess. He was about to discover Marshall had been playing three-dimensional chess all along. Wednesday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine. Marshall woke to find Emma making breakfast, cereal, and toast, her idea of cooking. She was smiling, the trauma of Monday beginning to fade. Sleep okay, sweetheart? Yeah. Dad? Are we going to have to see Mom? Marshall sat beside her. Eventually, but not until things are settled. Good. I don't want to see her. Or Grandma. They were mean. I know. Will you tell me what's happening? I'm not a baby. Marshall studied his daughter's serious face. 9 years old and already too wise. Your mom and I are getting divorced. It's not your fault, okay? Sometimes adults make choices that don't work out. Because of Uncle Preston, Marshall kept his expression neutral. What do you know about Preston? I saw him at Grandma's before. Mom said he was just a friend, but friends don't kiss like that. Christ. It's okay, Dad. I know Mom wasn't happy. She yelled at you a lot, and you were always working. Emma's eyes met his. But you came for me. Even when they said you wouldn't, I knew you would. Marshall pulled her into a hug. Always. No matter what. Will you win? Against them? Yes. Good. Because they're bad people. Grandma said you were. She paused, clearly repeating something she'd heard. Common. And that Mom deserved better. But I think you're the best dad ever. Marshall's heart clenched. This was what Sophia had been telling his daughter. That Marshall wasn't good enough, that Emma came from lesser stock on his side. The casual cruelty of it made his blood boil. Thank you, sweetheart. Now finish breakfast. School in 30 minutes. His phone buzzed as Emma headed upstairs. Aaron Stevenson. Emergency hearing got moved up, Aaron said. Today at 2. Judge Chun wants to address the restraining order immediately. That's fast. Brooke's pushing hard. I think she wants to establish legal custody before something changes. You ready? More than ready. At 1:30, Marshall walked into the courthouse with Aaron beside him. The hearing was in Judge Patricia Chen's chambers, a preliminary proceeding before any trial. Brooke sat with her lawyer, a sharp woman named Elisa Peterson who specialized in custody battles. Preston lurked in the back, trying to look supportive. Judge Chun was in her 60s, fair but stern, with a reputation for cutting through bullshit. She reviewed the filings with a frown. Mrs. Benjamin, she began, you're alleging emotional neglect and potential harm to the child. Yet the child was forcibly held at your mother's residence while Mr. Benjamin attempted to see her. Explain that discrepancy. Elisa Peterson stood. Your Honor, my client was attempting to create a stable environment for Emma during this difficult transition. Mr. Benjamin's reaction, showing up with private security, demonstrates exactly the kind of aggressive behavior we're concerned about. He showed up, Judge Chun said dryly, because his daughter was being held against her will and crying. That doesn't strike me as aggressive. That strikes me as parental. With all respect, Your Honor, I'm not finished. Judge Chun turned to Marshall. Mr. Benjamin, you're seeking primary custody. On what grounds? Marshall stood. My wife engaged in parental alienation, Your Honor. She told our daughter I didn't want to see her. She changed locks to prevent my access. She coordinated with her family to create a situation where Emma was isolated and frightened. Those aren't the actions of a parent interested in the child's well-being. Those are the actions of someone using a child as leverage. Leverage for what? For a property transaction that requires my cooperation or my absence to proceed. My mother-in-law is selling commercial real estate. As Brooke's husband, I have review rights under the family trust. If we're divorced, I lose those rights. This custody battle is about money, not Emma's welfare. Elisa Peterson shot to her feet. Your Honor, that's a baseless accusation. Is it? Aaron Stevenson interjected, sliding a folder across the judge's desk. We have documentation of the property sale, timeline of the divorce filing, and evidence that Mrs. Benjamin has been conducting an affair with a lawyer representing the buyer's interests in related matters. Judge Chen opened the folder, scanning the contents. Her expression hardened. Mrs. Peterson, I'm denying the restraining order. Furthermore, I'm granting temporary primary custody to Mr. Benjamin until a full hearing can be scheduled. Mrs. Benjamin will have supervised visitation 2 hours per week, location to be determined by Mr. Benjamin. Brooke gasped. You can't. I can and I am. You want to explain to me why I should do otherwise? You'd better have evidence beyond allegations. This hearing is adjourned. In the hallway outside, Brooke confronted Marshall with tears streaming down her face. Real or performative, he couldn't tell anymore. You're going to regret this, she hissed. My mother will destroy you. Preston will. Preston will what? Marshall asked calmly. Help you? He's got problems of his own right now. Her eyes narrowed. What did you do? Nothing yet. But you might want to ask him about Edmund Madden. I hear they have an appointment tomorrow. He walked away, leaving Brooke standing in the courthouse corridor, her carefully constructed plan crumbling around her. Outside, Vernon waited by Marshall's car. How'd it go? Better than expected. I got primary custody, at least temporarily. Good, because I've got news. Barrera just backed out of the property sale. Marshall stopped. What? Someone sent him documentation about the tax avoidance scheme. He doesn't want to touch property with that kind of legal cloud hanging over it. Sale's dead. Who sent it? Vernon smiled. Anonymous tip to his lawyer. Can't imagine who'd do such a thing. Marshall didn't have to imagine. Which means Sophia's sale falls through, Preston can't cover his gambling debt, and Brooke's inheritance prospects just evaporated. All at once. Almost like someone planned it. Almost. Marshall agreed. He was starting to enjoy this. Thursday morning brought chaos. Marshall's phone lit up with calls from Brooke, from Elisa Peterson, from numbers he didn't recognize. He ignored them all. Instead, he sat in his office and waited for the dominoes to fall. The first call that mattered came at 10. Edmund Madden. Preston defaulted. Madden said simply. 72 hours was generous. He's asking for extensions. I'm not inclined to grant them. What happens now? Now I collect. His car, his apartment, his assets. If he still can't pay, it gets unpleasant. Thought you'd want to know. Appreciate it. The second call came at 11. Roland Barrera's lawyer, demanding to know who'd leaked the tax information. Marshall played innocent, suggested they investigate Sophia's family members. Let them turn on each other. The third call came at noon. Guy Dotson. You son of a bitch, Guy snarled. You tanked my mother's sale. I didn't do anything, Marshall said truthfully. I just made sure the truth came out. Not my fault Barrera didn't want to touch dirty property. That sale was going to save my company. I needed that money. Then you should have built a better company. This isn't over, Marshall. My mother has resources you can't imagine. Your mother is about to face federal tax charges, Marshall replied calmly. I'd be more worried about that than revenge. Guy hung up. Marshall added the call to his evidence file. Threats on record were always useful. Vernon arrived at 1 with lunch and news. Sophia Dodson's in full panic mode, Vernon reported. She's hired a crisis management firm. They're trying to spin the tax story as accounting errors, but the IRS doesn't care. She's looking at an audit minimum, possible criminal charges maximum. And Brooke? Meeting with Preston, my guess. She's demanding he fix this. But he can't. He's too busy trying to keep Madden from breaking his kneecaps. Marshall took a bite of his sandwich, considering. Everything was proceeding according to plan. But something nagged at him, a detail he was missing. What about Steve Phillips? The PI Preston hired. Vernon's expression darkened. That's the concerning part. Phillips dropped off the map yesterday. No activity, no surveillance. Either Preston couldn't pay him, or Phillips is planning something big. Find him. Already on it. That afternoon, Marshall picked up Emma from school personally. As they drove home, she chattered about her day, blissfully unaware of the war being waged around her. He was grateful for that innocence. At home, he helped her with homework, fractions, which she hated, then made dinner. Normal dad things. The life he'd been neglecting, the life Brooke had accused him of not wanting. She'd been wrong. He'd wanted this. He'd just been too stupid to prioritize it. After Emma went to bed, Marshall returned to his study. His computer showed new emails, most of them noise. But one stood out, an anonymous message with a video attachment. Marshall hesitated, then clicked. The video showed Preston Holmes in what looked like his apartment, meeting with a woman Marshall didn't recognize. They spoke in low tones, but the audio was clear enough. "Sophie is freaking out," Preston said. "The sale's dead, Madden's breathing down my neck, and Marshall somehow orchestrated all of it." "So fix it," the woman replied. She was early 30s, blonde, professional. Something about her seemed familiar. "I can't. He's got leverage everywhere. Unless what?" Preston leaned closer. "Unless we go after his daughter directly. Stage an incident. Make him look dangerous. With the right evidence, even Judge Shun would have to reconsider custody." The woman nodded. "Phillips can handle it. He's done it before." Marshall's blood ran cold. They were planning to frame him using Emma. Create some scenario where he appeared to have hurt or endangered his own daughter. The video ended. Marshall sat frozen, rage and calculation warring within him. This was beyond litigation, beyond financial maneuvering. They were threatening Emma. That changed everything. He forwarded the video to Vernon with a single word: "Now." Then he called Aaron Stevenson, despite the late hour. "I need emergency protective orders," Marshall said. "Preston Holmes and associates are planning to harm my daughter to manufacture evidence. I have video proof." Aaron was silent for a moment. "Marshall, if you're wrong about this." "I'm not. Watch the video. Then tell me I'm overreacting." 20 minutes later, Aaron called back, voice grim. "File it tonight. I'll have papers ready for Judge Chun first thing tomorrow. This is attempted conspiracy to commit fraud and child endangerment." "Do it." Marshall hung up and walked upstairs to check on Emma one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her mother and stepfather-to-be were planning to use her as a pawn in their desperate schemes. Not anymore. Marshall had been playing defense, dismantling their plans piece by piece. Time to go on offense. He returned to his study and pulled up a file he'd been building. Comprehensive documentation of every illegal, unethical, and immoral act he'd discovered. Preston's gambling debts and insider trading. Sophia's tax evasion. Brooke's adultery and parental alienation. Roland Barrera's building code violations and the deaths they caused. Guy Dodson's fraudulent investor pitches. Separately, each was damaging. Together, properly presented, they were catastrophic. Marshall had built his career on knowing when to present evidence for maximum impact. That moment had arrived. He began making calls. First, to the IRS tip line, providing detailed documentation of Sophia's tax schemes. Second, to the Connecticut Bar Association, filing an ethics complaint against Preston Holmes with evidence of his gambling-related corruption. Third, to Edmund Madden, providing Preston's location and schedule. Fourth, to the FBI, documenting Roland Barrera's pattern of building code violations and the suspicious deaths that have followed. Fifth, to the Manhattan District Attorney, providing evidence of the Ivory Room's illegal gambling operations, while carefully noting Edmund Madden's cooperation in exposing the conspiracy against Marshall. Vernon had promised Madden protection in exchange for testimony. Sixth, to Sherry Bright, releasing the full media campaign, devoted Father Fight's corrupt ex-wife and her criminal family. By midnight, Marshall had lit fires that would burn for months. By morning, the dominoes would fall. And by the end, everyone who tried to take Emma from him would understand that Marshall Benjamin had been playing a different game all along. He wasn't fighting for custody. He was fighting for complete annihilation. Friday morning arrived with headlines. Prominent real estate matriarch under federal investigation. Manhattan lawyer faces ethics charges over gambling debts. FBI raids property developers' offices. Marshall read them over coffee, Emma humming as she ate breakfast across from him. Vernon had sent confirmations throughout the night. Every filing had been received, every investigation opened, every domino positioned perfectly. The real chaos would begin today. At 9, Marshall's doorbell rang. 2 FBI agents stood outside with a warrant, not for him, but requesting his testimony about Sophia Dotson's tax schemes. He invited them in, provided documentation, and spent 2 hours methodically destroying Sophia's defense before she could even hire a lawyer. At 11, Preston Holmes called. Marshall let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "You psychotic bastard. Madden's people are outside my apartment. The Bar Association suspended my license pending investigation. My firm is talking about termination. We need to talk. We need to make a deal." Marshall deleted the message. At 1, Brooke showed up at his house, mascara running, hands shaking. Marshall opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Please," she said. "Please, Marshall. Make it stop. My mother's facing federal charges. Preston's ruined. Guy's startup collapsed when his investors pulled out. Just tell me what you want." "What I want." Marshall kept his voice level, pleasant even. "I want Emma. Full custody, no visitation rights for you until she's 18 and can choose for herself. She's my daughter too. You used her as leverage. You traumatized her. You let Preston plan to hurt her, to manufacture evidence against me. What kind of mother does that?" Brooke's face crumpled. "I didn't know about that. I swear. Preston said he was just going to find dirt on you, not. But you were fine with him manufacturing evidence? With him destroying me to get what you wanted? I wanted a life. A real marriage. Not whatever we had. Then you should have asked for a divorce like an adult instead of staging a kidnapping." Brooke reached for him. Marshall stepped back. "The deal is this," he said coldly. "You sign over full custody. You admit in court that you engaged in parental alienation. You testify against Preston and your mother in their respective legal proceedings. In exchange, I won't pursue criminal charges against you for conspiracy. I'll have nothing. No daughter, no husband, no inheritance. You'll have your freedom. That's more than you deserve." She stared at him, tears streaming. "I loved you once. Did that mean anything?" "It meant everything," Marshall said. "That's why this hurts so much. But you made your choice, Brooke. Now live with it." He closed the door. That afternoon, Judge Chun held an emergency hearing based on the video evidence. Aaron Stevenson presented everything. The conspiracy to frame Marshall, Preston's gambling debts, the property sale manipulation, all of it. Elisa Peterson tried to argue, but there was nothing to argue against. The evidence was overwhelming. Judge Chun granted Marshall full custody on the spot. Brooke's parental rights were suspended pending psychiatric evaluation. Preston Holmes was ordered to stay away from both Marshall and Emma, with criminal charges pending. In the hallway afterward, Preston tried one last gambit. He approached Marshall with what he probably thought was a conciliatory smile. "Look, we both got carried away. We're professionals. We can work something out." Marshall studied the man who'd helped plan to hurt his daughter. "You're right about one thing. We are professionals, which is why I'm going to enjoy watching the Bar Association destroy you with the same precision you tried to use against me. I can still make your life difficult." "No," Marshall said simply. "You can't. You're broke, facing criminal charges, and your reputation is destroyed. I own you, Preston. The only question is how much worse I decide to make it." Preston's facade cracked. "You're not going to let this go, are you? Not until you've lost everything." "Why? You won. You got Emma. Why keep going?" Marshall leaned in close. "Because you threatened my daughter. And I need to make sure everyone understands what happens when you do that. Consider yourself the lesson." He walked away, leaving Preston in the courthouse corridor, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. Vernon met Marshall outside. "Madden's people picked up Preston an hour ago. He's got until Monday to produce $250,000. He won't make it. What happens then? Nothing permanent. Broken bones heal. But it'll hurt, and he'll carry reminders. Marshall should have felt guilty about that. He didn't. Sophia, he asked. Federal grand jury convenes next week. Her lawyers are already talking plea deals, but the evidence is too solid. She's looking at 5 years minimum. Guy, bankrupt by end of month. His investors pulled out when the family scandal broke. He's threatening lawsuits, but he's got no money for lawyers. And Barrera? Vernon smiled. FBI found building code violations at 15 properties. Criminal negligence charges are pending. He's done. Marshall took a breath. In 1 week, he'd systematically dismantled everyone who'd threatened his daughter. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he just felt tired. It's done, Vernon said quietly. You can stop now. Can I? Marshall, you won. Decisively. Continuing to destroy them is just revenge. They were planning to hurt Emma. And they failed, and they're paying for it. The question is whether you want to be the kind of man who keeps kicking when the fight's over. Marshall looked at his old friend. What would you do? I'd go home to my daughter. I'd let the legal system finish what you started. And I'd focus on being the father you promised to be. Vernon was right. Marshall knew it. But some part of him, the part that had spent a week learning to fight dirty, wanted to keep going. Wanted to make sure they never got up again. I'll think about it, he said. That evening, Marshall sat with Emma watching a movie. She was curled against him, finally relaxed, the terror of the past week fading. Dad, she said during a commercial, are things going to be normal now? What's normal? You know, school, homework, pizza on Fridays. Normal. Marshall kissed the top of her head. Yes, sweetheart. Things are going to be normal. And Mom, you don't have to see her until you're ready. Emma was quiet for a moment. I'm mad at her, but I'm also sad. Is that okay? That's very okay. Love is complicated. Did you love her? I did. I probably still do a little. But love isn't enough if people hurt each other. Will you get married again? Marshall laughed. Let's get through this year first. Okay. But if you do, make sure she's nice. And that she likes me. Anyone I marry would have to love you. Non-negotiable. Emma smiled and turned back to the movie. Marshall held his daughter and thought about Vernon's question. What kind of man did he want to be? He'd started this fight believing in justice and playing by rules. But he learned that sometimes the rules weren't enough. Sometimes you had to bend them, break them, or rewrite them entirely. He'd won. Emma was safe. His enemies were destroyed. The question was what he did next. 3 months later, Marshall sat in his office reviewing case files. The Dotson saga had settled into its final form. Sophia pleading guilty to tax evasion and getting 4 years in federal prison. Preston disbarred and serving 18 months for fraud and conspiracy. Brooke in therapy, supervised visitation reinstated but rarely used. Guy Dotson working as a middle manager in Seattle, ego crushed but surviving. Roland Barrera was awaiting trial on multiple counts of criminal negligence. His empire had collapsed, investors fleeing, properties seized. Edmund Madden had walked away clean, having cooperated with federal investigations in exchange for immunity. He'd sent Marshall a bottle of expensive bourbon and a note. You ever need anything? The media cycle had moved on to other scandals. Sherry Bright's campaign had worked perfectly. Marshall emerged as the devoted father fighting corruption. His reputation had never been stronger. But the victory felt hollow. Emma was thriving. She'd made new friends at school, her grades had improved, and she'd started seeing a child psychologist who said she was processing the trauma remarkably well. She asked about Brooke sometimes, but without the desperate need she'd had before. She was learning that people could disappoint you, and life went on. Marshall had cut back his caseload, spending more time at home. He coached Emma's soccer team. He helped with homework. He had pizza Fridays. He was being the father he should have been all along. Vernon stopped by on a Tuesday afternoon, bringing coffee and updates. Preston got out early, Vernon said. Good behavior, overcrowding. He's living with his parents in Greenwich, working at his uncle's car dealership. Marshall felt nothing. Think he learned his lesson? I think he learned not to fuck with you. Whether that's the same thing. Vernon shrugged. And Brooke? Still in Connecticut. She got a job at a nonprofit, something with kids. Trying to rebuild, I guess. Marshall stared out his window. The city sprawled below, full of people fighting their own battles, making their own mistakes. Vernon, was I wrong? going after them as hard as I did. Vernon, consider this. They threatened your daughter. You protected her. Everything else was just making sure they couldn't do it again. But did I take it too far? Only you can answer that. Marshall thought about Sophia in prison, Preston broken, Brooke alone. He destroyed them systematically, professionally, completely. I don't regret it, he admitted. I probably should, but I don't. Then that's your answer. After Vernon left, Marshall pulled up an email that had been sitting in his inbox for a week. From Brooke. Marshall, I know I have no right to ask anything from you, but I'm trying to do better. I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself. I understand why you hate me. I hate myself for what I did to Emma, but she's still my daughter. When you think she's ready, not now, I know it's too soon, but someday, could we try supervised visitation? Real visits, not the court-ordered performances. I want to be her mother again. I want to earn that right back. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just a chance. B. Marshall read it 3 times. The man he'd been before this started would have said yes immediately, would have believed in redemption and second chances. The man he'd become wanted to delete it and never look back. He compromised. Brooke, Emma will decide when and if she wants to see you. When that time comes, I won't stand in her way. But earn it. Prove you've changed. Not to me. I don't care anymore. Prove it to her. M. He hit send before he could overthink it. That evening, Emma asked about Christmas plans. Can we do something special? She asked. Just us. What did you have in mind? I don't know. Maybe a trip? Somewhere with snow? And we could ski and drink hot chocolate and not think about anything sad. Marshall pulled her into a hug. That sounds perfect. Just us, though. Nobody else. Just us. As Emma went upstairs to research ski resorts, Marshall sat in his living room and took stock. He'd won his war. He'd protected his daughter. He'd destroyed his enemies. But in the process, he'd become someone harder, someone willing to cross lines he'd never thought he'd cross. Was that a price worth paying? He looked at Emma's research notes scattered across the coffee table, her handwriting looping and enthusiastic. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Because at the end of the day, Emma was safe. She was happy. She was his. And anyone who tried to threaten that again would learn the same lesson Preston, Brooke, and Sophia had learned. Marshall Benjamin protected what was his. Always. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Marshall received an unexpected visitor. Judge Patricia Chun appeared at his office unannounced, retirement having freed her schedule. She presided over dozens of his cases over the years, and they developed a mutual respect. Marshall, she said, settling into his client chair. I want to talk to you off the record. Your Honor. Patricia, please. I'm retired. Titles don't matter anymore. Marshall poured them both coffee. What's on your mind? The Dotson case. Your divorce. Marshall stiffened. What about it? I've been thinking about it. How perfectly everything aligned for you. How thoroughly you destroyed everyone involved. The timing of the federal investigations, the media coverage, the evidence that appeared exactly when you needed it. I got lucky. Patricia smiled. No, you were strategic. Brilliantly so. Everything you did was legal, barely, and devastatingly effective. You played the system like a virtuoso. Is there a point to this? The point is that I've spent 30 years watching lawyers fight in my courtroom. Most of them play by the rules because they don't know any better. Some play by the rules because they're afraid of the consequences. But you play by the rules because you understand them well enough to know exactly where they bend. Marshall said nothing. You scare me a little, Marshall. The thoroughness of your revenge. The precision. You didn't just win, you annihilated them. And you did it all within the bounds of the law. They threatened my daughter. I know. And they deserved everything they got. But I'm asking you to think about what you learned during that fight. Because the next time you're in my former colleagues' courtrooms, they're going to be wondering if you'll use those same tactics on their watch. Marshall met her eyes. Are you warning me? I'm reminding you that reputation is a double-edged sword. You've proven you can destroy people. Now prove you can win without destroying them. And if they threaten what I love. Patricia stood, setting down her coffee cup. Then God help them, because clearly the law won't. She left, and Marshall sat alone with her words. She was right. He learned too much about how to fight dirty. And that knowledge didn't disappear just because the immediate threat was gone. Emma appeared in his doorway, surprising him. "Dad? Uncle Vernon's here. He brought lunch." "Thanks, sweetheart. I'll be right there." Emma hesitated. That lady who just left, she seemed serious. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Just an old friend checking in." "Okay. Love you." "Love you too." Marshall gathered his files and headed to meet Vernon. Whatever he'd become during the war with Brooks' family, he'd done it for the right reasons. That had to count for something. A year after the divorce, Marshall Benjamin stood in his daughter's school gymnasium, watching her receive an award for academic achievement. She was 10 now, taller, more confident, the trauma of that terrible week fading into memory. Brooks sat 3 rows behind them. Marshall had relented 6 months ago when Emma had asked to see her mother. The visits were monthly, supervised by a therapist, and slowly rebuilding something that resembled a relationship. Marshall didn't hate Brooke anymore. He didn't feel much of anything toward her. She was Emma's mother, nothing more or less. After the ceremony, Emma ran up with her certificate. "Did you see? I got the highest score in my grade." "I saw. I'm so proud of you. Can we celebrate? Maybe that Italian place you like." "Absolutely." Brooke approached hesitantly. "Emma, you were wonderful up there." "Thanks, Mom." Emma's response was polite but distant. She'd forgiven her mother, but trust was earned slowly. "Marshall," Brooke said, "could I have a moment?" Marshall nodded to Emma. "Go find Uncle Vernon. He's around here somewhere." When they were alone, Brooke said, "I wanted to thank you for letting me back in her life. I know I don't deserve it." "You're right. You don't." But Emma asked, and I won't deny her that choice. "I'm getting remarried. To someone you don't know. Someone normal. I wanted you to hear it from me." Marshall felt a flicker of something. Not jealousy, but maybe regret for what might have been. "Does Emma know?" "Not yet. I'll tell her this weekend. I want to make sure you were okay with it first. It's your life, Brooke. You don't need my permission. Still, after everything, I hope you're happy. Genuinely. Because if you're happy and stable, Emma benefits. That's all I care about." Brooke's eyes glistened. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For what I put you through, what I put Emma through. I was selfish and stupid and cruel." "Yes, you were. Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" Marshall considered this. "I already have. Forgiveness doesn't mean trust. It just means I'm not letting what you did poison the rest of my life." "That's very mature. I had good motivation." He looked across the gymnasium at Emma, laughing with Vernon. "She's thriving despite what we put her through. That's what matters. She loves you so much. You know that." "I do. She's lucky to have you." Marshall didn't respond to that. Brooke walked away, and he watched her go without anger or regret. Vernon appeared with Emma in tow. "Celebrating at Luigi's?" "You're invited," Emma said to Vernon. "You have to come. You're family." Vernon's tough expression softened. "Can't say no to that." At dinner, Emma chattered about her classes, her friends, her plans for summer. She was just a regular kid with regular problems. Homework she didn't like, a boy in her class who was annoying, dreams of learning to surf. The terror of that week a year ago seemed distant now. Marshall had protected her, removed the threat, and given her space to heal. Mission accomplished. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Marshall sat in his study with a glass of scotch. He pulled out a folder he'd kept locked in his desk. Complete documentation of everything he'd done to destroy Brooks' family. The evidence he'd gathered. The calls he'd made. The investigations he'd triggered. The lives he'd systematically dismantled. He told himself it was justice. Protection. Necessary. And it had been. But it had also been revenge, pure and simple. Marshall had always prided himself on being better than his opponents, on winning through superior preparation and legal skill. But during that terrible week and the months that followed, he learned he could be just as ruthless as anyone. That knowledge scared him. Patricia Chin had been right. He'd proven he could destroy people. The question was whether he could still win without destruction. He needed to believe the answer was yes. Marshall burned the folder in his fireplace, watching the papers curl and blacken. The evidence was already part of official record in various investigations. Keeping his own copy served no purpose except as a reminder of what he was capable of. Better to let it go. The last page to burn was a photograph, Brooke, Emma, and himself from 5 years ago, before everything fell apart. They looked happy. Maybe they had been, in that moment. The photo caught flame and disappeared. Marshall finished his scotch and went upstairs. He checked on Emma one last time, kissed her forehead, and returned to his own room. Tomorrow he'd coach her soccer practice. This weekend they'd go hiking. Next month they'd take that ski trip she'd been planning. He'd be the father he should have been all along. And if anyone ever threatened his daughter again, well, they'd learn the same lesson Brooke had learned. Marshall Benjamin forgave, but he never forgot. And he always protected what was his. 2 years later, Marshall received a letter from Sophia Dodson. She'd been released early from federal prison for health reasons, elderly and diminished, but alive. Marshall, I'm writing because I'm dying. Cancer, 6 months at most. I don't expect your sympathy. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that you were right about everything. I was a terrible person. I used my daughter, I threatened my granddaughter, and I deserve what I got. Brooke tells me Emma is thriving, that you're an exceptional father. I'm glad. She deserves better than the family I created. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just wanted you to know that sometimes the bad guys realize they were wrong. Too late to matter, but still. Sophia. Marshall read the letter twice, then filed it away. He didn't respond. Some accounts didn't need closing. Some people didn't deserve final words. Sophia Dodson died 4 months later. Brooke called to tell him, her voice steady. I'm not asking you to care, she said. Just thought you should know. Thank you for telling me. Emma asked if we could go to the funeral. I told her it was up to you. Marshall thought about it. Does she want to go? She says she should. That it's the right thing to do, even if Grandma was mean. Then we'll go. Together. Show Emma that you can honor the dead without forgiving them. That's very gracious. It's for Emma, not for Sophia. The funeral was small, a handful of old friends, some distant relatives, Brooke and Guy. Preston didn't attend, apparently still too broken to face the family he'd helped destroy. Emma stood between Marshall and Brooke, holding both their hands. She was 12 now, poised and thoughtful, processing grief with remarkable maturity. Dad, she whispered during the service. Is it wrong that I'm not sad? No, sweetheart. You feel what you feel. I feel relieved. Like maybe Mom can move on now. Is that bad? That's very perceptive. After the burial, Guy Dodson approached Marshall for the first time in 2 years. She left everything to charity, Guy said. The house, the remaining assets. Nothing for Brooke or me. That was her choice. Because of you, she said in her will that we'd proven we couldn't be trusted with the family legacy. No, Guy, you proved that yourselves. Guy stared at him with impotent rage, then walked away. Brooke watched him go. He'll never forgive you. I can live with that. Can you? Carrying all that anger, Marshall looked at his ex-wife. She'd changed in 2 years, softer, more genuine, or maybe just worn down by consequences. Her new husband stood nearby, respectful distance, clearly devoted. I'm not angry anymore, Marshall said. I haven't been for a while. I just learned who I needed to be to protect Emma. And I became that person, even if it meant becoming someone you didn't like. I like who I am. I'm a good father. I'm good at my job. I sleep fine at night. Do you? Really? Marshall smiled. Better than you'd think. They drove home, separately, Emma quiet in the passenger seat. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. If you had to do it all over again, the divorce, everything that happened, would you do it the same way? Marshall thought carefully before answering. The question isn't whether I'd do it the same way. It's whether the outcome justified the methods. Did it? He looked at his daughter. Healthy, happy, safe. Yes. Every time. Emma nodded, satisfied. Good. Because I think you're the best dad in the world. Marshall's throat tightened. Thank you, sweetheart. That night, alone in his study, Marshall finally acknowledged what he'd been avoiding for 2 years. He'd won completely. Emma was his. His enemies were destroyed. His reputation was intact. But the man he'd become in the process, cold, calculating, willing to burn down anything that threatened him, that man was permanent. You couldn't learn to fight that way and then forget. Patricia Chun had warned him. Vernon had questioned him. Even Brooke had seen it. Marshall Benjamin had proven he could destroy people. And somewhere, deep down, he discovered he was good at it. Maybe even enjoyed it. That should have scared him more than it did. But when he looked at Emma's artwork on his fridge, her trophies on his shelves, her life blooming under his protection, he couldn't bring himself to regret a single thing he'd done. The ends had justified the means. And if anyone ever threatened her again, he'd do it all over again, faster and harder. Because that's who Marshall Benjamin had become. A father who would burn the world to keep his daughter safe. And he was perfectly okay with that. 5 years after the divorce, Marshall Benjamin stood at Emma's high school graduation. She was 17, brilliant, accepted to 3 Ivy League schools, everything he'd hoped she'd become. Brooke sat beside him. Their relationship evolved into something like friendship. Her second marriage was stable. She'd rebuilt her life. She and Emma had genuine relationship now, complete with inside jokes and shopping trips. Marshall was happy for them both. She's graduating valedictorian, Brooke said, pride evident. I can't believe it. I can. She worked for it. You worked for it too. The tutors, the study sessions, the support. You gave her everything. We both did. In the end, Emma's speech was about resilience, about overcoming challenges, about becoming stronger through adversity. She didn't mention the divorce directly, but Marshall heard echoes of it throughout. She'd taken their family's darkest moment and transmuted it into strength. After the ceremony, Emma hugged them both. I couldn't have done this without you. Either of you. Brooke wiped tears. We're so proud of you. Emma turned to Marshall. Dad, I need to tell you something. What's that? I'm thinking about law school. Because of you. Because I watched you fight for me, and I want to fight for other people like that. Marshall's chest swelled. You'd be an amazing lawyer. I want to be like you. Smart, strong, willing to do what's necessary. Is that okay? He thought about all the things he'd done, all the lines he'd crossed. Just remember that power comes with responsibility. Use it wisely. I will. You taught me that. That night, Vernon joined them for celebration dinner. He'd become a permanent fixture in their lives, more uncle than friend. So, Vernon said to Emma, law school, you know what you're getting into? I think so. Dad's going to help me prepare. Your dad's got a particular approach to law. Make sure you develop your own. Emma looked between them, curious. What do you mean? Marshall and Vernon exchanged glances. Your father, Vernon said carefully, is brilliant at finding people's weaknesses and exploiting them. It makes him very effective, but it's also a weapon. Make sure you know when to use it and when to choose mercy. Emma considered this. The divorce. You're talking about what he did to Mom and Grandma and Preston. No one spoke. I know what you did, Dad, Emma continued. I'm not a kid anymore. I know you destroyed them systematically. Grandma went to prison. Preston lost everything. Mom barely survived. Marshall's hands tightened on his glass. Emma, and I'm glad you did it, she said firmly, because they were hurting me. They were using me, and you stopped them. So yes, I want to learn to fight like you, because sometimes people need to be stopped. Just make sure, Brooke said quietly, that you never become the person who needs stopping. Emma nodded seriously. I won't. I promise. The dinner continued, conversation turning lighter. But Marshall couldn't shake Emma's words. I'm glad you did it. His daughter had seen everything he'd done and approved. That should have concerned him. Instead, it felt like validation. The story of Marshall Benjamin didn't end with the divorce or the destruction of his enemies or even Emma's graduation. It continued in the quiet moments, teaching Emma to drive, helping her move into her college dorm, watching her grow into a fierce, brilliant young woman who knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less. It continued in his work, where he'd become known as the lawyer you hired when you absolutely, positively needed to win and didn't care what it took. It continued in his relationship with Vernon, who'd become family in all the ways that mattered. And it continued in his relationship with Brooke, who'd learned her lesson and rebuilt herself into someone worthy of her daughter's respect. But most importantly, it continued in Marshall himself. He'd learned that he was capable of ruthlessness when necessary. That justice and law weren't always the same thing. That sometimes you had to become the monster to defeat the monsters. And he'd learned he was okay with that. Because at the end of the day, Emma was safe, healthy, and thriving. That was all that mattered. Everything else was just details. Preston Holmes worked at a car dealership, broken and irrelevant. Sophia Dodson was dead, her legacy in ashes. Guy Dodson lived paycheck to paycheck, dreams abandoned. Roland Barrera served 15 years for criminal negligence. And Marshall Benjamin? He'd won. Completely. Utterly. Finally. And anyone foolish enough to threaten his family in the future would learn the same lesson they'd learned. Marshall Benjamin protected what was his. Always. Without mercy. Without hesitation. Without regret. Because that's who he'd become. And he was perfectly fine with that. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.